won the 1973 run. Right now he's with Jackaroo.
And Gordon Johncock was on a sabbatical for the last couple of days. You weren't feeling well, Gordon, but now you are going to run starting 33rd?
Well, I'm going to run. I've ran when I'm a lot worse shape than I am right now. Seems like when you get out there and the adrenaline gets flowing, you get started and go, you forget about being sick.
You talk about adrenaline. There was a lot flowing when you had that close victory over Rick Mears. What are your memories of that?
Well, I just remember him coming on a second in a lap. You know, I was watching him in my mirrors, and my car just kept getting worse and worse every lap, you know, and I didn't think I'd really be able to stay out in front and hold him off.
Now, you're the second oldest driver in this field. Of course, the oldest, A.J. Foyt. Will you keep coming back till you beat A.J.'s record?
That's very possible. But I don't know. A.J. says it's his last year, but I myself, I don't really believe it.
You're going to tell us how old you are?
54.
He may be off by a year or so, though, Paul.
Gordon Johncock, very likable two-time winner of the Indianapolis 500. 1982, one of the closest finishes in history, and Johncock was a key player.
Sam, we've got a trophy dash to the finish line. If this stays this way, there's never been anything like it. The closest finish in the history of Indianapolis was in 1937, 2.16 seconds. There's Dina Mears. Her man is the man that's closing on the leader.
Yep, look at Mears pour it on, Jim. I know when you're this close, I mean, you can reach out, you can feel that guy ahead of you. And look at Mears now. Here's Johncock taking a fairly moderate line, and Mears is catching him. Look at his speed off that turn.
I've never seen anything like it. There they go. 2 laps to go. There's time to catch him if he can do it. Rick Mears, his wife. The stopwatch, 0.63 seconds between them.
I don't have to tell you what's going to happen if he catches him. It's going to be, I mean, this is an extremely dangerous business right here.
I don't think I've ever seen an open wheel car race with people this close at the finish.
No, and never so fast. I mean, these laps in the high 190.
Look at this.
Dina there. All right.
He may do it.
Yeah, he may. He's that close. Look at that shallow line.
They're going to get the white flag. There'll be 1 lap to go. As he moves along, tries for Johncock. Is he going to do it? The white flag out. This is the final lap.
Going down into the first turn. What? No. Gordon held him off there going into that first turn.
Over the roar of the engine, you can hear the 400,000 people going hoarse.
All right.
No one has ever seen this before in Indianapolis.
This is the back straight, Jim. There's 2 turns to go now. Mears behind, and he's again trying to slipstream it.
Johncock did a good job of staying ahead of him in turn 1 when he made that move there.
Good. That
may
was
be
brilliant.
enough.
That was brilliant.
Not quite over. Johncock still with the lead.
Here it comes
Headed
again.
for the finish line. He's still closing. That's his wife.
It's too late now. You only got to pray. Look at that.
Here you see them. Mears. Can he make a move at the finish? He's making a move. No. Not quite. Gordon Johncock has won the Indianapolis 500. He won it by less than a car length. Less than a car length after 500 miles. The disappointed wife of Rick Mears there. Wow. The jubilation in the pits, the Pat Patrick pits. Gordon Johncock has won it. He held on in the closest finish in the history of the Indianapolis 500. 66 races. Never anything like this. That's Roger Penske's wife, Kathy, consoling Dina Mears. Well,
what could you say to somebody after
I guess
that?
we did get carried away, Sam, but
well,
somebody else might be able to help it. I could.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Jim, it's the victory of a great racing driver who made a great racing move.
Let's look at that finish again.
All right. Well, here is.
It looks like he's beaten at this point, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Coming out of the last turn.
Yep. There's nothing but frustration there.
Now watch this. Making the move as they come to the finish line. There's Mears moving up, and it was just a little over a car length, about 20 feet.
And of course, all of this history weaves together. There's Emerson Fittipaldi winner 2 years ago, and Roger Penske, the winningest car owner at the Speedway. And in the field, of course, Roger's other driver, Rick Mears, starts on the pole. Gordon Johncock starts in 33rd position. Now, there are the corporate suites that overlook the fourth turn. There are many ways to view the Indianapolis 500. You could sit up there as a VIP guest. General Norman Schwarzkopf is up there, for example, today. Or you can buy a ticket into the massive grandstands here, about 300,000 of those available. Or you can come like so many do and just join us in the infield, which is full of mud today and a little bit tougher to see the race from. Now let's go back down trackside. Danny Sullivan is with Gary Gerald.
He's been in the garage area, Paul, just 15 minutes or so. Came over from the Speedway Motel in the golf cart, has now gotten dressed, and the waiting game continues. And we were just talking about how difficult this is on the emotions, because regardless of what any driver says, this is a whole different environment at Indianapolis.
Well, that's true. Of course, we've been here, you know, for 3 weeks. The build-up, the parties, everything, the testing every day. That just keeps swelling and swelling until now, and you're ready to go. We were ready 2 days ago, and you're ready to run. And now with this rain, you know, it's on, it's off. They say there's a cloud behind this one. You know, you don't know really what to do with your butterflies and your emotions.
What kind of a game plan do you have for this race? Because we know that it's been an ongoing struggle to get the horsepower, to get the straightaway speed, to be competitive with some of the other front runners who've grabbed the headlines this month.
Well, for us, I think the big thing, particularly with the weather, is we've got to try to stay on the leader lap. We've got to try to stay there, because come 101 laps, this race could be called if it rains any time after that. We've got to try to stay there and hope that we're in contention when it gets close to the end of the race.
You've been through this drill so many times in the past. Any special or unusual emotions on this race day?
Not really. I think a little bit different because, as you said, we haven't been one of the guys setting the pace, so we're not the contender in the way we have been in years past. And we just got to keep trying to work on it and get just consistent and run on the leader lap the whole race.
Danny Sullivan from row 3 as we go back up to Paul Page.
And as Danny Sullivan will tell you, no one ever does it alone. It takes the work of a top flight crew to win at Indianapolis. There's also a chance for the crew to shine for just a bit. Earlier this week on Thursday, the Miller Pit Stop Contest was that moment.
Following Thursday's final on-track practice, a huge crowd packed the Tower Terrace grandstands for the 15th renewal of the Miller Genuine Draft Pit Stop Championship. The first semifinal pairing matched A.J. Foyt's crew against the Patrick Racing team backing Danny Sullivan. At the drop of the green, each team was free to go. Each 6-man crew electronically timed from the moment the car enters the pit box to the time it leaves the designated pit area. Each team was required to change 4 tires and connect their fueling equipment. Sullivan had no trouble advancing to the finals despite a 5-second penalty for having a man over the wall too soon. Sullivan's crew got the break it needed when problems with a stubborn right front wheel left Foyt fuming in the cockpit in frustration. Eventually, the stop was completed, but the only consolation for the Foyt crew was a $5,000 prize and the hope that there'd be no reoccurrence of such problems race day. The second semifinal matchup had Bobby Rahal and the Gallus Craco team going against Mario Andretti and the Newman Haas crew. As each team came over the wall into action, it looked like a classic showdown. Each crew flawless, completing their assigned task in a fraction over 13 seconds. But as the cars came down off the jacks and Rahal pulled away, Mario's car stalled, and the jubilant Rahal crew was on the way to the finals against Sullivan, much to the dismay of Mario's backers. At stake in the finals, $25,000 to the winners, $15,000 to the runners-up. At the drop of starter Dwayne Sweeney's green flag, Sullivan was away quickly and into the pit box well ahead of Rahal. But keep in mind that the separate timing of each team didn't start until the car tripped the timing light entering the pit. Sullivan's crew, that had survived preliminary competition against 10 other teams, completed their work in 13.1 seconds, barely holding off a gallant late bid by Rahal's crew that proved to be just 0.2 of a second slower. For Sullivan, the victory was his 4th, a record for the Miller competition, but the first for the Patrick Racing Alfa Romeo team.
And of course, that Miller Pit Stop Contest is just part of the many festivities, both here at the track and with the 500 Festival, that continue throughout the week before the running of the race. The track is drying very nicely now. Let's take this time for another installment in our continuing series on what's new in sports, science, and technology.
Spend one more time on this leg. Do you notice more with your right leg?
We're back live as Emerson Fittipaldi, who's a physical fitness fanatic, is making his final preparations before the start of the race with the help of a trainer. Now let's go to Jack Arute, who is with our pole sitter.
That man is Rick Mears, and Rick, you're waiting out this rain delay as they continue to dry the track inside the confines of your garage. What are your concerns, though? Has the concerns changed now that you know we've had some wet?
No, not really. I think, you know, we ran in so many different conditions this month so far. I think we've found the car seems to handle all of them fairly equal. So really the only thing I think today so far, other than the rain, if it rains some more, would be the wind blowing. The wind's blowing pretty hard, which would make turn 3 and 4 a little sensitive.
Now, what will that do to you inside the race car if you do hit that wind?
Well, basically it'll make the car understeer or push in turn 3, try to blow the nose out from under you. And then turning into turn 4 where you're turning back into the wind, and it'll kind of pin the nose of the car and make the car loose. So it's going to... You're going to have a little bit broader setup on balance. You're going to have to live with a little bit more one way or the other to help cure those problems.
A terrific front row. You're on the pole. What will be your first lap strategy?
Well, we're going to try to get a jump if we can. And, you know, we always want to try to get the jump, and if we get it, that's great. And, you know, we'll try to lead it. If not, we're going to fall in line like normal and, you know, just kind of sit there and bide our time, see what the track conditions are like, stay in the hunt, and hopefully be ready at the end.
A lot of people saying you might let A.J. Foyt lead that first lap.
Well, we're good friends and everything, and I'm tickled for AJ, but racing's racing, and I'm sure he'd do the same thing.
Paul?
Let's remember, too, that every time he's been on the pole, he has never led the first lap. General Norman Schwarzkopf. Boy, the crowd is pleased that he is here today, visiting the 500-mile race for his first time. And just before the rains began to fall here, dampening the track, some 3,000 troops that served in the Gulf War marched around this track, and despite the rain, the crowd came out and watched that happen. Well, you can see that track is drying very quickly, just a little bit of moisture down inside toward the pit wall itself. Now, let's go to Gary Gerald. He's with Mario Andretti.
And Paul, it's funny that you mentioned General Schwarzkopf, because Mario Andretti had dinner with the General last night. I'm sure that was a great experience.
Well, it was quite a bit of quality time with him at Mary Holman's party last night, and to me it was just an incredible pleasure to be able to meet him, and he's everything that I expected. He just portrays the confidence that all of us know already, that you know, from the job that the troops have done over there in the Persian Gulf.
Mario, of course, starts outside in the front row, and over the years many have said that that's the best place to start this race. You've got AJ to your left and Rick Mears on the inside, and a lot of speculation about the first lap. How much have you really thought about lap number 1 of this 500-mile race?
Well, you think about it, of course, because you want to get it right, but obviously you can't speculate with yourself too much, because you just don't know what the other guys are going to do. So it's going to be a matter of who really gets the so-called hole shot out of turn 4 and what gear ratios are. So whoever gets into that first corner first obviously will get the corner.
A lot of experience. This is the 26th time that Mario Andretti has been through this drill. He's hoping that for the second time he'll end up in victory lane. Paul?
What a wonderful moment. Mario and this man, General Norman Schwarzkopf, as he now makes a tour of the Speedway. Apparently the officials here are very confident in the drying of the track, because they're sending these celebrity cars out onto the racetrack. And look at the crowd. Everyone on their feet. The cheers are magnificent. Now, Mario Andretti won driving for Andy Granatelli. Granatelli was known for innovation here at the Speedway, and in the middle 60s, that innovation was just incredible. Let's go back and look at the turbine-powered cars.
This is the Whooshmobile, designed for 3 years in secret by Andy Granatelli. It was called Whooshmobile because of the distinctive sound made by its power plant, a Pratt & Whitney aircraft turbine. The car was ultra-modern, all-wheel drive, a monocoque chassis, and even a flap in the back that would jump up and air brake the car whenever the driver touched the brake pedal. The driver was the great Parnelli Jones, and in 1967, with this car, he dominated most of the 500.
The Turbine was without question the talk of Gasoline Alley with its unique features. Many of the drivers complained about the air brake jumping up at the back of the car and frightening them as they headed into the corners. Still, each time out to practice, the fear of this magnificent machine grew in Gasoline Alley. Parnelli Jones would start 6th on the grid with a qualifying time just over 166 miles an hour. Mario Andretti would sit on the pole at nearly 169 miles an hour. But as the green flag came out, it became evident that nothing could match the brute speed of Granatelli's Turbine. Jones motored into the lead halfway down the backstretch of the opening lap. The only person that could slow Parnelli down that day was the weatherman. Heavy rains hit the speedway after 19 laps and the race was postponed. Jones picked up where he left off the following day. A number of wrecks depleted the field. Wally Dallenbach was the victim of an accident, as was Leroy Yarborough, George Snyder, and Johnny Rutherford. The caution light would flash for over an hour. But then the unthinkable happened in the waning laps. An inexpensive rear-end bearing broke, and the Turbine was powerless. The despondent STP crew, headed by Andy Granatelli, kept looking northward for the appearance of their car. Finally, they saw the machine creeping at a snail's pace, obviously destined to go no further. After leading 172 laps, Parnelli's day was done. Andy Granatelli could only stare in disbelief at his silent and failed dream. A.J. Foyt moved into the lead now with just 4 laps to go. But his path to a third victory was momentarily blocked when Bobby Grimm, Chuck Hulse, Carl Williams, and Bud Tinglestead, along with Larry Dixon, crashed on the final lap. A.J. suspected trouble and slowed down, and was able to snake his way through the wreckage and take the checkered flag to join the elite list of 3-time winners at the Indy 500. The Turbine would come back to try again, only to eventually be rendered ineffective by changes in the rules.
And while that winner in 1967 may have changed just a little bit, the intensity still burns so great. 34 years, A.J. Foyt, and now you've had to delay your final start at the Indianapolis 500 by half hour or so. What are your thoughts right now?
Well, I just hope we have a real fast race, a good, safe race, and just may the best man win. And I'm looking forward to it. It's the first race I've been back since I've been injured, and kind of looking forward to get back in the seat again.
Middle of that front row, though, that leaves you in a position where can you dictate the start, or do you have to follow what Rick Mears does?
Well, I like to be able to dictate the start, but you got to follow the pole man. He sets the pace, and actually Mario's got the nice slot on the starting position, but a lot depends on how we all accelerate. You know, a lot of times these cars accelerate good, sometimes they don't, and a lot depends on how we come up. If we accelerate good, we'll be right there. If we don't, we just fall back and wait.
What, 8 months ago when you were just starting your rehabilitation, did you ever really in your own mind believe that you could be here?
Well, I've always felt like when I put my mind to doing something, I can do it. I know a lot of people didn't think we'd be back, but I said I'd be back, and that was my goal, and I reached it.
Well, congratulations, A.J. Paul?
Isn't it incredible how calm A.J. looks before the start of his race? Emerson Fittipaldi won 2 years ago. He's with Jerry Punch.
Emo is extremely relaxed here, as always, in the garage area. It's a 2-time national champion, world champion. Emo, starting back in row 5. You're not accustomed to being back there. Concerned at the start of the race?
Well, I'm sure it's going to be much more difficult where I'm starting. I'm starting good company with Arie Luyendyk and Gary Bettenhaus, but it will be a lot of traffic. It will be difficult. I would say mainly the first 20 laps, you have to be careful, more conservative than if I would start on the front.
Now, we saw you moments ago with Jim Landis back there doing some stretching, some movement. What was that for?
Well, I think the stretch always helps. I'll be sitting in the cockpit for 3.5 hours possible. And, it's nice to be relaxed, nice to be, stretch up and warm up to go and do a good race.
Now, it's difficult enough to focus on the task at hand, 500 miles, but your wife, Teresa, 8.5 months pregnant, will be sitting in the pits. You're going to have to wander a little bit and think about her.
Well, I told her to wait after the race, and like last night, I said, don't make sure the baby don't come tonight. I have to have a good night's sleep, but she hold it. And now she has to hold it for the race.
The crew said they made us radio Mo during one of the laps and say, Mo, it's a boy. Back to you, Paul.
Emma would like to be in the car much shorter time, 2 hours 41 minutes, the record time here set last year. So many wonderful stories, so many great drivers in this 500-mile race, the 75th running. So now let's begin to meet the drivers in the 75th running of the Indianapolis 500. The field is the traditional 11 rows of 3. We'll start in the back with position 33 and move toward the front. In the 11th row, from the inside out, is Randy Lewis, Pancho Carter, and two-time winner Gordon Johncock. It was just 2 weeks ago that Gordy was working his farm when he got a call to come and drive the Indy 500. In 1982, he won by 16/100ths of a second, the closest 500 ever. The 10th row is made up of 3 very persevering men, Roberto Guerrero, Willie T. Ribbs, and Dominic Dobson. Dominic crashed hard 2 weeks ago, chipping a bone in his leg. But the team bought another car, and now with a knee brace on his leg, he's ready for his 4th Indy. History was made when Willie T. Ribbs became the first African-American to join the field. In 1987, Roberto Guerrero's engine stalled while leading to give the race to Al Unser. In the 9th row, John Paul Jr. in his 3rd 500, Finland's Tero Pomrod, and Scott Pruitt. It was just a year ago March when Scotty was injured in a testing accident at West Palm Beach, Florida. Since that time, he has been in constant rehabilitation just to prepare to drive in this race. The 8th row has 2 rookies and a veteran, Jeff Brabham in his 9th race, Buddy Lazier and Hiro Mashusta. Mashusta is the first Japanese to drive in the 500. He relaxes shooting pool. Buddy Lazier is a skier and operates a resort with his Indy driver dad. Jeff Brabham sits in his dad's number 17, the first successful rear-engine car from back in 1961. The back 4 rows have 1 former winner, 3 rookies, and the slowest car in the field. And we'll meet more of the starting field in just a little bit. Still cloudy over Indianapolis, but the track for the moment is very, very dry. We will start right on time. You know, almost every profession or craft uses a shortcut in language to describe very complex things. Racing is no different. Here are some simple terms that express much more complex ideas. For example, we may say a car is pushing. Push, or understeer, is the tendency of the car to continue straight after the wheels are turned. The best example of push came in 1988 with Danny Sullivan. Now watch his hands. As he turned the car, went straight, and he pushed into the wall. The opposite of push is loose, or oversteer, when the back end tries to slide out once the wheels are turned. 3 years ago, Scott Brayton got loose in the Indy 500. The back end swerved out. He overcorrected, fought the car, and lost to the loose condition. We also refer to the stagger setting. Stagger is making the right rear tire slightly larger in diameter than the left rear. It helps the car turn left easier because the right rear is driving the car into the corner. The short chutes are straights that link between the 1st and 2nd and 3rd and 4th turns. In the race itself, we'll refer to the move over flag. The starter will display this flag to advise another driver another car is following closely. Now sometimes a driver will be black flagged. That means you report to your pit, where a race official will either check your car for safety or reprimand you for a violation. Over in the 3rd turn, a guard section and the American flag. Patriotism rampant in this country at this time. And the celebrities continue to circle the track, and the officials of this race, getting more and more confident, have already begun their countdown to the start of the engines. They say just 43 and a half minutes away, and the 75th running of the Great Indianapolis 500 will be underway. Stay with us. It should be a most exciting afternoon. Floating over the speedway now, the Airship America. It travels about 20 miles an hour. The race cars, a good 200 miles an hour faster. The Goodyear blimp, about 1,000 feet up. There's the shot down as we count down to the start of the engines. Well, this has been a most emotional year at Indianapolis, and many of the emotions have focused on a single man. Here's the story, as told by Sam Posey to his son, John.
Dad, who's the greatest racing driver ever?
Well, a long time ago, when winning depended more on the driver than the car, the very best was a man from Texas named A.J. Foyt.
A.J. Foyt? Did he win the Indy 500?
You bet. He won it 4 times.
Well, what was he like?
His dad, Tony, owned a garage, so A.J. grew up around cars, and the first time he drove, he was just 8 years old.
He took a midget out of the garage and running around in the backyard out there until he hit the side of the house with it and set it on fire, and I was out of town at another midget race.
A.J. loved driving dirt tracks, where you have to really wrestle with your car. The other drivers were afraid of him. Sometimes he'd get into fights and beat them up. But when he went to Indy, he knew it was a big step, knew it was his turn to be afraid.
That race morning, I was a nervous wreck saying, is this what I want to do for a living or not? And they dropped the green flag, and if you recall, that's when they had the bad accident.
On that very first lap, a driver was killed, a driver who was one of A.J.'s friends.
No, I'd be truthful with you, I was very nervous and very scared. And I saw a good friend of mine, Pat O'Connor, lose his life, you know, and which I respected highly. And I said to myself, this might be too rough of a game for A.J. Foyt.
It was rough in those days. 13 of the drivers who started in A.J.'s first Indy would be killed racing. So A.J. decided it was better not to have too many friends. But he had his dad, so he wasn't lonely. And then he won Indy, and he beat a great driver named Eddie Sachs. 3 years later, A.J. won Indy again, but it was a black day. 2 drivers got killed, and one of them was Eddie Sachs. A.J. Foyt was tough. A.J. Foyt survived. In his third win, he came from way behind, refusing to give up.
Where's Foyt? I don't know whether he can get through or not. There he is! A.J. Foyt will win the Indianapolis 500.
In those days, A.J. would drive anything, and he won more races in different kinds of cars than anyone ever had. The fans loved him. He was what racing was all about: the danger, the speed, the glory. A.J. won his 4th Indy driving a car he and his dad had built themselves, engine and all. They had won, but racing was beginning to change, and soon the things A.J. was so good at wouldn't matter so much. The new idea was to build cars a lot like airplanes, which made them very expensive. Car owners such as Roger Penske wore suits, not T-shirts, and they had computers in wind tunnels. They built cars in factories, while A.J. and his dad had only their shop. A.J. didn't want to raise money and wear a suit. He wanted to race.
I'm just going to do whatever A.J. wants to do, and I guess I'm a little bit hard-headed, a little bit stubborn, and got a lot of pride. And it's either a lot of times my way or the highway, and I don't think I'll ever change from that.
Did A.J. ever crash?
Oh, lots of times. But once in 1965, he crashed so bad he broke his back and had to spend weeks in the hospital.
Stop racing?
No, but he was planning to. Trouble was, A.J. wanted to race one more time the way he used to.
You mean like when he was the best?
Yeah, but then a terrible thing happened. It was late last summer. A.J.'s brakes failed and he smashed into a dirt bank. His legs and feet were crushed, and in his pain, he had a dream and he thought his dad was with him, even though he knew his dad was dead.
When I got hurt, I felt like I talked to my father. I know that sounds crazy, but like he come there, he talked to me, said everything's gonna be all right, and then he just disappeared again.
Pins and screws held his legs together.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Then a strange thing happened. A.J. realized getting better would be a challenge a lot like the old days, when he was able to do the impossible.
There you go, that's better.
Although he was by now 56, he amazed his doctors with his tolerance for pain, and the more people said he wouldn't be ready for Indy, the more he wanted to prove them wrong.
Now, come on, you gotta go now. Come on, that's a better pull. Come on, push!
It was a race against time, and he won.
The track is open for qualification.
For 4 laps, he made time stand still. He reached into the past for the greatness that had been his, but that he had lost. Maybe he thought his dad was watching. and that made him try even harder.
Racing has really been my whole life. I love racing. It's going to be hard to leave. I just want to be remembered as just AJ, and that's about it. You know, nothing special. I mean, just AJ.
Since 1958, much of the history of this great race has revolved around this man, A.J. Foyt. He's seen it all here. Today, perhaps he will see a 5th time in victory lane. The countdown continues to the start of the Indy 500. He's the vice president today, but of course, he's also a Hoosier. And like so many Hoosiers, as a boy, he started coming to this race. Now he circles the track. We take a look now as we continue with the starting field. Some of the fastest cars will actually start in the mid-pack of this field. Continuing to look at the fastest field in history. In the 7th row, from the inside to the outside, are Midwesterners Scott Brayton and Tony Bettenhausen. Outside, Mexico's Bernard Jourdain. The 6th row, inside, is Kevin Kogan. In the center of the row is Stan Fox. And outside, the fastest rookie, Mike Groff. Groff loves to restore old cars and old homes in his spare time. Wisconsin's Stan Fox is a top midget racer. And Californian Kevin Kogan drives a Buick today, but he flies his own plane in his other life as a real estate developer. Row 5 is the fastest in the field, with the fastest driver, Gary Bettenhausen, the defending champion, Arie Luyendyk, and the '89 winner, Emerson Fittipaldi. Emo works out daily. He adds to his health regimen by keeping to a special diet that includes seaweed. Today, he drives a Penske Chevrolet. Arie Luyendyk won the first race of his career here last year, earning $1 million. Now the man from Holland is able to pursue his second love by opening an art gallery. Arie drives the #1 Lola Chevrolet. Gary Bettenhausen lives in rural Indiana. His family has dreamed of an Indy win for 2 generations. Today is his best chance in the #51 Lola Buick. So, Gary Bettenhausen may in fact have a chance here today. Now, of course, the story of Gary Bettenhausen as the fastest car in the field is so much more than just that. It's a story of a legacy here at the Indianapolis 500. Sam Posey has this report.
Gary Bettenhausen's father, Tony, raced at Indy in the 1950s. But Tony would die at the Speedway, and the legacy he left his 3 sons was his unfulfilled dream of winning the race. The family's luck, however, has been all bad. Gary led, but his car broke down. His brother Merle lost his arm in Michigan, and Gary's arm was crushed in this sprint car crash. 2 weeks ago, the Bettenhausen's strange destiny again hung in the air. Gary made the fastest qualifying run of the year.
The fastest story of 1991.
But the result was bittersweet. The run came a day too late to put him on the pole, and it fell exactly on the 30th anniversary of his father's death.
My wife and I talked about that on the way in. But it's a better day today.
What would it mean to him to win the race?
Unbelievable. I can't even explain it, I don't think. You know, I'd have to wait, and if it ever happens, then I'll tell you what it means.
One of the many wonderful stories as we look back through Gasoline Alley. Those are the garages back on the other side of that grandstand. The drivers have begun to move to the track. There's Gary Bettenhausen along with his brother Merle. Since 1946, Bettenhausen has made this walk through Gasoline Alley 44 times. It's the 19th time for this man, Gary Bettenhausen. Of course, he drives today with still some paralysis in his left arm as a result of a sprint car accident years ago. So Gary Bentonhausen starts on the inside of the 5th row, the fastest row in the field. But then there is that marvelous veteran front row. Posey?
Well, it almost seems that, Paul, fate must have stepped in to create this fabulous front row of Mears, Foyt, and Andretti, a kind of Mount Rushmore of racing. It's hard to believe they were once kids. Rick with his long hair out in the desert with a dune buggy, AJ getting into brawls in the pits, Mario, the young immigrant from Italy, sailing past the Statue of Liberty. Today they are legends, but each knows that much of his fame rests on his exploits here, and that today's race is as important as any he has ever run. Now, because of its importance, this race becomes more difficult each year, doesn't it, Bobby Unser?
Well, Sam, there is no place in racing that puts pressure on a driver like here at Indianapolis. In racing, a driver realizes if he wins Indy, he'll be immortalized, and the pressures come from everywhere. A driver's hometown, the vast world media, approximately 500,000 fans here at the track, and many millions of people watching TV and listening to the radio all over the world. A lot of people ask me, do the drivers really get butterflies before the race? Now, I don't care whether you're a rookie or a 34-year veteran. It's solid knots in the stomach, at least until the green flag drops.
Well, in the state of Indiana, the Speedway is the 2nd largest city on race day. A crowd approaching nearly 500,000 people, and the cars have begun now to make their appearance in the pit area. The crew's laboring over them. And here comes the 85 winner, Danny Sullivan. Two Alfa Romeos in the race, and from the Marion County Sheriff's Office here in Indianapolis, the drill team, and Danny's teammate Roberto Guerrero, already well down the pit road with his lovely wife Katie. Very special moment as these drivers move now toward joining their teams and cars. 10 wins have come from the first rows in the 500 as we continue our look at the starting field. The front 4 rows all qualified on the first day of time trials. In the 4th row, on the inside is Eddie Cheever, Jeff Andretti in the center, and Canadian Scott Goodyear to the outside. With the addition of Mario's younger son Jeff, plus Michael and their cousin John, 12% of this field are named Andretti. Eddie Cheever sweated the last month here in Indianapolis preparing for this race. His wife Rita chose instead to stay at their Monaco home, but she's here today to watch him drive in Chip Ganassi's number 8 Lola Chevrolet. In the 3rd row, on the inside, John Andretti, Jim Crawford in the center, Danny Sullivan to the outside. In 1985, Danny Sullivan spun and then won his first Indianapolis 500. He is a modern man of many personalities. The real Danny Sullivan will start this race in the number 20 Alfa Romeo, driving for the Pat Patrick Racing Stable. Last year, Jim Crawford took flight in practice here. The transplanted Scotsman still limps from a crash in qualifying in 1987 that forced him out of racing for a year. But Jim is back, driving again for drag racer Kenny Bernstein in a Lola powered by Buick. John Andretti and his father Aldo share a love of racing history. Aldo is Mario's twin brother. John won his first IndyCar race in March, driving the Lola Chevy for the Hall VDS team. 14 winners have come from the 2nd row. Today inside is Bobby Rahal, then Michael Andretti, and Al Unser Jr. outside. Little Al is an avid outdoorsman. The defending PPG Cup champion is the sole representative of the Unser clan today. He drives a Lola Chevrolet. This may be Michael Andretti's last 500. He began testing for the McLaren Formula One team this year, and if he has his way, he'll drive only in F1 for the next several years. His best finish here is 4th in 1988. He hasn't finished the last 2 years, but today he drives the Newman Haas Lola Chevrolet. Bobby Rahal is on a fitness campaign, cycling with friends daily. The 1986 500 winner has finished 2nd in every race this year. He carries Maury Crane's blue and yellow livery on his number 18 Lola Chevrolet. 71 Indy 500 starts are in the veteran first row. Pole sitter Rick Mears, four-time winner A.J. Foyt, and Mario Andretti, who drove to victory here in 1969 for Andy Granatelli. A year and a half ago, Mario took up golf as a counterpoint to the tensions of the track. In the last 11 years, the former world champion has only finished twice. He starts in his 26th 500 in the Newman Haas Lola Chevrolet. Anthony Joseph Foyt Jr., the first four-time winner, a record 67 championship wins, the only man to win here in both front and rear engine cars. The oldest driver in the field at age 56, AJ starts his number 14 in his 34th straight 500. Away from the track, Bakersfield, California's Rick Mears loves the water. It relaxes him while he plans even greater victories. He starts on the pole for a record 6 times. But it was just 2.5 weeks ago that Rick Mears slammed the first turn wall in the only wreck he's ever had at Indianapolis. Twice, in 1979 and 88, he's won from the pole. He starts today driving a Penske Chevrolet. In the front 4 rows, there are 4 former winners and 4 members of the Andretti family, and so appropriately, they all walk out into the pit area together. There's John, his wife Nancy, Michael, and Mario. Mario holds hands with his wife Sandy as they prepare for the 500. Counting today, the Andretti family has 39 collective starts, but only 11 times have they gone the distance. John Andretti, his new colors for this year, Jeff Andretti. That's the youngest of the family, Michael's younger brother, Mario's youngest son. Vice President continues to make his rounds on the track itself. In these times of renewed patriotism, the country is still concerned about the troops abroad. Danny Sullivan and Scott Pruitt visited the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt, still on station in the Eastern Mediterranean. The TR, CVN-71 and its squadrons have been at sea since last December. There is a close relationship between race drivers and jet pilots, similar attitudes. Danny and Scott fit right in. For the ship's captain, a gift of Danny's helmet, with Scott following up with a presentation to the Group Admiral. To a man, the crew was thankful the drivers would take time to visit, as the TR still stands vigil over troops in the Middle East.
Nice to meet you. How you go?
The Theodore Roosevelt will remain at sea for another month, but today they were focused on the IndyCar drivers. The drivers focused on their high-tech equipment. These crews are proud of their planes, their ship, and the role they played in the Gulf War.
Those little holes, that'd be just like a pothole? Yeah, probably.
The morning's flight's launch, they cleared the flight deck to stage the TR-500, a race among the crew's RC cars. Afterward, it was cheers for the IndyCar drivers. The crew of the CVN-71 play hard and work harder. Here, Danny and Scott were spectators to the most advanced technology of all, a U.S. Navy nuclear carrier and its squadrons. In 2 days aboard, they added 5,000 new fans to the Indy 500. What a marvelous trip that was for those racing drivers. Emerson Fittipaldi went along as well as they visited the Sigonella Naval Air Station in Sicily. The crowd, for the most part, in their seats, and many of them are soldiers that served in the Gulf War. Over 3,000 of them. They were all part of a march down the main straightaway a little bit earlier, looking forward to the running of the 500 miles. The crowd, despite the rain at that time, stayed right out next to the track so they could applaud these heroes as they moved around the speedway. So appropriate on this, the Memorial Day weekend. You can see that